By now, you know Anthony Joshua defeated Jake Paul in the 6th round via knockout, a vicious right hand, which broke Jake Paul's jaw in 2 places. He had surgery later that night, early Saturday morning. He appears to be in good spirits, and he appears to still very much want to fight. A lot of people have had their say. A lot of people have weighed in. I've weighed in briefly online, but I actually made a point. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I made a point not to ask anyone on the team what they thought of it. I don't know if the rest of the guys, Frank, everyone, I don't know if you hated it, loved it, thought it was a sham, thought it was incredible, thought it was great theater. I didn't want to know. I wanted to react in real time. I actually went out of my way not to watch other YouTube videos. You know, you see clips here and headlines, but I really wanted to go in fresh. And so I'll tell you some of the things that I thought, and then we'll get into a bit of a discussion. First things first, I do believe that the way in which you feel about this fight on the Monday after depends on how you felt about it going in. And what I mean by that is, if you were expecting Ali Frazier, if you were expecting Gotti Ward, if you were expecting Canelo Crawford, if you were expecting the best of the best, perhaps because you don't know much about boxing, or perhaps because you fell for whatever promotional tactics or anything like that, if you were expecting high-level boxing, a firefight, akin to some of the great fights over the past couple decades, Leonard Duran, stuff like that, Hagler Hearns. If you were expecting that, you were obviously disappointed, because there was no way that this fight was going to live up to that. There was no way, just given who was fighting, given the fact that Jake has, going into the fight, 13 fights on his resume, and Anthony is who he is. There was a massive discrepancy in terms of skill, size, height, weight, reach, resume, years in the game, everything. Everything was in Anthony's favor. So if you were expecting that kind of fight, you were obviously disappointed. The other group of people who are disappointed, so there's 2 groups. There's fans who maybe were, convinced that this was going to be something else. And then there's media who, for whatever reason, every time Jake Paul fights, feel like they have to virtue signal either to other promoters or to a community and fan base and say this was a sham, this was fixed, this was a black eye, this was the demise, this was the death, this was this, that, and the other. That's what they have to do. And then there's another group of people who knew exactly what it was from the get-go, who knew that, Jake Paul is still a novice boxer, who knew that he was biting off more than he could chew, who knew that, hey, he wasn't forced to fight Anthony Joshua. There was no matchmaker who said, hey, you must fight this guy next or else. No, they knew that he picked Anthony Joshua for whatever reason. Obviously, he can't fight Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. on Netflix. Netflix isn't going to be interested in that. There's only a certain caliber of fighter that they're going to be interested in. So a Ryan Garcia and Anthony Joshua, Terrence Crawford versus Jake, a Tank Davis would make sense. So he only has, a certain amount of fighters that he could choose from. The pool isn't as deep as if he was fighting on DAZN. So you knew once he picked Joshua that, okay, the deck was stacked against him. The odds should have been greater. We said this all week long. We said this all throughout the buildup. It should have been, negative 20,000 in favor of Joshua to be the favorite. And it was going to take, a real crazy circumstance for Jake to pull off the victory. If you are one of those people who knew exactly what you were getting, I would actually imagine that you walked away from that fight on Friday thinking to yourself, you know what? I actually think that delivered. I was actually okay with that. And I will say, and yes, I was working the broadcast, and yes, I was working for Netflix, and yes, you may say I'm flying a little bit too close to the sun, and that's totally okay. I walked away from that thinking, I thought that was entertaining. I thought that Jake actually earned people's respect. And again, I don't really know what people are saying online, but he hung in there for 6 rounds when most people said he's not going to make it past the first round, or 30 seconds, or 1 minute, 2 minutes. He went 6. Were there moments where it looked like he was hanging on for dear life? Absolutely. Were there moments where it was like, yeah, you shouldn't be trying to take the guy down, or you shouldn't be hanging on as much as you were hanging on? Absolutely. Were there moments where he actually cracked him with a couple of shots? Yes, as well. In the end, he lasted 6 rounds with a former 2-time heavyweight unified champion, with an Olympic gold medalist, with someone who may not be in his prime, but is not so far out of his prime to where it's like one of those fights where it's, Jake versus Mike Tyson from last year. And so as I'm watching it, I'm sitting there ringside, and I actually watched it yesterday on Netflix, and I'm thinking to myself, it's actually two different fights. When you're sitting there ringside, and I know I'm blessed to be sitting there that close, I was captivated the entire time because I thought at any moment, AJ, who is built like a Greek god, as he said, could take his head off. Some of those right hooks, some of those left hooks, some of those uppercuts, some of those jabs looked like they were that close to making him fly, make Jake Paul fly into the fifth row. And so the whole time, you're just sitting there waiting for it to happen. And then there are moments where Jake's hanging on for dear life and he throws a double jab or he throws a right overhand and you're like, oh shit, could this happen? You then start thinking about Andy Ruiz. So because of that, because I wasn't expecting Hagler Hearns and because I wasn't expecting, Holyfield and Tyson or Lewis Tyson or any of those great fights that I mentioned before, I felt like I was locked in the entire time. And then, of course, it ends the way in which it ends. But you then start talking to some people and you see some stuff here and there. And of course, you can't ignore all of it. You can't escape all of it. It seems as though, and I said this before the fight, anything other than a knockout in the first or second round, people weren't going to be happy with. And if it was a knockout in the first 30 seconds, they would have said, well, this was a waste of our time. And if it was a knockout in the fourth or fifth round, they would have said, oh, AJ was playing with his food, or AJ carried him, or AJ pulled his punches. I definitely saw some of that. And so it seemed like he had to knock him out in like the second or third, around the same time that he knocked out Francis Ngannou. And people aren't recognizing the fact, in my opinion, that A, it's ludicrous to say that AJ pulled his punches. I don't believe he pulled his punches. B, it's ludicrous to say this was scripted. Obviously, it's not scripted. You think it was part of the script for Jake Paul to break his jaw? Insane. How could he be pulling his punches and break his jaw at the same time? They're also ignoring three big things about Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua was coming off a 15-month layoff. I do think significant. Anthony Joshua had been knocked out in his last fight. I do think significant. Anthony Joshua was dealing with the pressure of the boxing community coming up to him at every turn saying, you have to knock this guy out. Please knock this guy out. If you don't knock this guy out, your legacy is shot. You're dead. You're done. No Tyson Fury fight. No fight in February. That's a lot of pressure as well. And so you don't want to take certain chances because you don't want to slip on that proverbial banana peel. He knows what it's like to get knocked out. He knows what it's like to get cracked when you're least expecting it. Just go back to the Andy Ruiz fight. And again, I'm not comparing Jake Paul to Andy Ruiz, but no one expected a short notice Andy Ruiz, who was replacing Big Baby Miller, to do that at Madison Square Garden. So he knows what it's like when you're looking past someone and you get unexpectedly cracked. The other thing that I think was significant is Anthony Joshua had a new team in his corner. We've seen, remember Ryan Garcia against Oscar Duarte, and he fought very weird in that fight. Sometimes when you have and that was just a couple of years ago, sometimes when you have a new corner, a new team, and he wasn't with those boys from Ukraine all that long, there's a feeling out process. You don't have familiar faces and voices and personalities around you. That takes some time as well. And so I think AJ walks away from that and his team saying 6 rounds in the bank, we didn't slip, we didn't get rocked, we didn't embarrass ourselves, and we didn't go the distance, which would have been viewed, I think, as sort of like a moral loss, if you will. We broke the kid's jaw, and now we're on to bigger and better. And oh, by the way, Anthony Joshua is on this Monday, and in the immediate aftermath, a massive star here in the United States. And I was actually surprised to see how many people didn't know who he was going into the fight. You see the reaction online. And in particular with the females, it seems like people are just enamored with the guy. And I get it. He freaking owned the week. His interviews were great. His press conferences were great. He looked fantastic. He comes across very likable. And you just got the impression that people are like, who is this guy? And it's funny for us because we've known him since the Olympic Games. We've known him for almost 14 years now. We've known him as the guy who beat Vladimir Klitschko and had the fights with Usyk and Ngannou and Dubois and all the stuff recently, the stadium shows and the Fury rivalry and all that. Madison Square Garden, Andy Ruiz rivalry. We've known this guy, but it seems like here in America, not a lot of people knew who he was. So that's why I don't expect these numbers to be as great as Canelo Crawford, because I think Canelo Crawford are way more well-known here in America, and the vast majority of the viewers are going to come from America. Probably the next day viewers in the UK will be greater because they maybe wanted to see Anthony, spark Jake Paul. But he's a massive winner in all of this. he comes across as a superstar, as someone that people are really interested in. And I bet his team is trying to figure out ways on how they can capitalize on this and maybe get him back to the United States at some point. Because remember, this was just his second fight in America. The first was Andy Ruiz in 2019. I think Jake didn't embarrass himself. I think Jake took the beating like a man, answered the questions afterwards. Even in the aftermath, didn't get knocked out cold, is smiling, is sticking out his tongue. He came across like a lunatic, like a madman, but I think in a respectable way, seemed to have enjoyed it in a weird way, and seems to want to keep fighting. And so I think that he comes across as a sort of unofficial winner, if you will. I think MVP comes across as an unofficial winner, if you will, as well, because that was their third Netflix card in the span of 13 months. There have been 4 Netflix boxing cards. And in a day and age when we hear Dana White continue to say that we, Zuffa Boxing, are the only ones with a network deal, MVP has now put on 3 in the span of 13 months, TKO the other one. And 2 of those were with Jake. One wasn't, the July card with Taylor and Serrano. And if you look at these cards, these aren't influencer cards. The only fight on that card that you can deem like somewhat influencer-y is Anderson Silva versus Tyron Woodley. And they're 2 legends. And you think they're upset about being a part of the MVP Netflix era? They're getting big paydays in their 50s and 40s. Anderson all of a sudden is having this like revival. He comes across looking great. The knockout was great. The rest of the card, you know, multiple title fights, 5 title fights total, 1 undisputed on the prelims, Baumgartner in the co-main. You got up-and-comers. Like, all this is good for boxing. And so you'll have people on this Monday say, this was a sham, this was, you know, this was a black, you know, all the usual stuff that we predicted they were going to say afterwards, ignoring the fact that boxing is on the biggest platform in the world, Netflix, ignoring the fact that Jake took on the biggest challenge he could possibly take on short notice. After Tank falls through, he goes and he's like, where's Francis? Okay, I'll go for the guy who beat Francis. I'll go for AJ. Ignoring the fact that, you know, I think some people's stock were elevated on the undercard. Some of the fights on the undercard were really, really great. And ultimately, like, there isn't that much to be upset about. There isn't that much to be mad about. Netflix being involved in boxing is great. Jake stepping up and taking Anthony's best shots were great. I don't think Anthony looked bad at all. There were times where I felt like he was headhunting. There were times where I felt like he was like trying to knock him out because I think he wanted to get rid of him. But you have to understand, when you have a guy who's running as much as he did and take shots at him or not for the game plan, that was his best way of surviving. It's like trying to chase a wet duck. You have to get him. And I think Anthony did actually a good job of pinning him into the corner sometimes, cutting off the ring. But it's hard to get a guy who's moving so much, who's clinching you, who's trying to do the antics that he was doing. That was the best chance for Jake to survive and then hope that he could crack him. He got tired. The ring was big. It was 22 by 22 as opposed to 20 by 20. There was a significant difference. And ultimately, he did what he had to do to survive. He tried to sneak in some big shots, but in the end, the better boxer was going to systematically break him down, and that's what he did, and he got the victory. So I left that show on Friday thinking, this feels like a win for everyone involved. This feels like a win for Netflix, a win for MVP, a win for Eddie and AJ and Matchroom. That's their guy. A win for Jake, and then a win for all the other fighters. I actually thought, in a way, it was the best of all the Netflix cards so far, as far as the 3 MVP cards. People were a little disappointed with Taylor Serrano and the main event and the lack of action. People had their say about, you know, Jake and Tyson and the streaming issues and whatnot. This was one that I felt like it was like, if you are looking at it, you know, with a clear mind, clear conscience, no bias, check, 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 check. That was my view. Now let me ask the team. What did you guys think? Rick, I'll start with you. I've not asked a single one of you what you thought. Rick and GC were in attendance. You guys were watching it. Didn't see you guys, by the way. I saw my mom and sister. I was looking for you guys. Couldn't see you. Was hoping for a wave. Was hoping for a little, how are you? Didn't see you guys. What did you think?
I think everybody did their part. I think you kind of touched on the fact that it seemed like everybody involved won. I don't know if I say that. I think you could kind of debate individuals, but I think everybody did their part. And for that, I mean, for the longest time we've been hearing, and the outcry has been, Jake Paul doesn't take real fights. We have to see Jake Paul in a real fight. That's the only thing that I care about. He doesn't take real fights. He only fights old people. He only fights this. He only fights that. He delivered. He put his nuts on the table and he said, I'm going to take a real fight. Not only am I going to take a real fight, I'm going to fight a former heavyweight champion with knockout power who just dispatched of Francis Ngannou 2 fights ago in a way that was quite devastating. I'm going to go in against that guy. So to me, Jake Paul held up his side of the equation. I kind of view these I didn't have high expectations in terms of the boxing product. I think of this like the way that some people used to say, like, I read Playboy for the articles. I don't watch Jake Paul fights for boxing. I watch Jake Paul fights for spectacle. Like, if you came in thinking that this was going to be a display of the greatest boxing you've ever seen, you're just misinformed. Like, I don't know what you could possibly think that for.
That's my only takeaway when I hear people say this didn't deliver, this was a sham, this was this, because I'm thinking to myself, what did you expect?
Yeah.
What do you think he is? What do you think? And I'm not knocking him when I say that but yes, it is a spectacle. You see that walkout, you see that crowd, you see the energy in the building. That's what it is.
Jake Paul is fighting on Netflix, right? There is a certain expectation. There's a certain understanding there. I don't think Mike Tyson is currently one of the best boxers on the planet. But to put Mike Tyson in a ring and be opposite that, you have presented something that is intriguing to people. In this case, the sell for this fight was Jake Paul telling everybody, yeah, I think I'm going to die as much as you guys do. He's going to hurt me. So let's see it. And I was in for that. That hooked me. That got me going because that's what I've kind of wanted from Jake Paul. I don't care about, like, I've said this many times on the show, I don't care about Jake Paul fighting the 13th ranked guy in his weight class. I could not care less about that. I don't watch Jake Paul for the boxing. I watch Jake Paul for the spectacle. And as far as the spectacle it delivered, I don't think, like, Anthony Joshua deserves a ton of criticism for anything because he was, again, there's a lot on the line for him. He has to fight a little bit cautiously. And in the end of it, he ended up knocking him out pretty brutally, too. He broke his freaking jaw. So let's not act like, this was some nonsense where it was just like theatrics and show. In the way that I thought Jake carried Mike Tyson, Anthony Joshua was just trying not to get hurt and hurt Jake Paul. And he did a pretty damn good job of it. Ultimately, I think everybody brought what they needed to bring to the table. The promotion was great. I thought Jake and Anthony were great all week, and it delivered in that perspective. I was not watching to see a competitive boxing match, nor was I watching to see the highest level of boxing.
GC, what do you think?
You mentioned the Mike Tyson carrying one. When you go back and watch that, it really did feel like he was fighting against a 58-year-old man, and he realized he didn't want to hurt him, a legend in the sport, and it felt like he kind of knew he was going to win the fight. He took off the gas, and he carried him for the later rounds of that fight, so it went to a decision. With this one, it did not feel like, I see a lot of people claiming that, AJ, once he got through the contractual side agreement and they needed to go 4 or 5 rounds or whatever, that's when he really started fighting or anything like that. I think Jake Paul just came in with a game plan, like you said, Ariel, to survive. I think he knew that he was up against it. He was going to have to land a massive shot if he was going to win the fight. So he just came out there to survive, to last longer than Francis Ngannou, put on a show, and then eventually he ran out of gas. He couldn't run around the ring anymore, and he ended up getting knocked out like we all thought he was going to by Anthony Joshua. So I give him respect for taking the fight, for going in there and taking the shots from Anthony Joshua and trying to make, as Rick said, a spectacle of it and go out there and go out on a shield. But at the end of the day, it was sort of what I expected, just in a different way. It lasted longer, but it was never competitive. Scoring it, I had AJ up 5 rounds to none with a 10-7 in the 5th, so 50-43, and then he knocked him out in the 6th round. So uncompetitive, but I guess it's like you said, it's still a win for both these guys, especially AJ, because anyone that's gonna fault him for it going longer is just gonna say that Jake Paul was running around shooting for takedowns, everything like that, and he ends up getting the knockout, massive payday, and breaks his jaw on the way out. So I think at the end of the day, I'm in agreement with you that everyone kind of comes out of this winning. Like, as history goes on, people will forget about the running around, and the next time Jake Paul fights, they'll be just as interested as the last time.
What do you think, PT?
I thought the spectacle was great. The broadcast was great. I think, outrage and controversy are the lifeblood of these events. If we came away being like, that was good, everyone's happy, that isn't what a Jake Paul fight is. This debate, this kind of sifting through the debris of an event is part of this. There is still an element of, what do we want to see this guy do next? What do we want to see? I think the problem, I agree with GC, what he said, he was trying to last in there. I think that's where the boxing purists are getting upset about this, because it did seem like he was in an escape room for as long as this was going on. He was just trying to get away from the fight. He did catch him, as you said, on a number of occasions. But I honestly think, right, so we were talking about Joshua's position here. You were at the start, where he was at in his career. He was going to come back, and according to Matchroom, they were looking for like a top 100 heavyweight for him to fight, like just to get him going again, to get him, boxing again. I think if he had fought that, like a level of that kind of guy, and this guy came in and he was shooting these takedowns or whatever you want to call them that Jake Paul was on, I think he would have won a lot of controversy. He would have won a lot of criticism for that. But the thing is, we're watching a Jake Paul fight. This is millions of eyeballs. If that had happened, that wouldn't have been happening on Netflix. You wouldn't have all these people watching if it was a fight like that. The sell of the event is like, look how crazy this is, and it did seem crazy as long as it was happening. I'm not trying to say for a second that Jake Paul doesn't deserve respect. He does, as we've pointed out here. He's broken his jaw, and that's a horrific injury for a boxer. Kelly Pavlik, Amir Khan are just a number of people who've had their careers completely altered by breaking their jaws. They were never the same again. Even MMA, Brendan Schaub, Nogueira knocked him out, broke his jaw, wasn't the same. Chris Weidman, I believe it was Rockholt, broke his jaw, wasn't the same. This is a very serious toll he's after taking on his body to do this. But I can see why people are upset about it, but at the same time,
I really can't. I can't see what you're upset about. I really can't. And if you're upset about it, then what do you have to say about some of the other performances on the card? Were you upset about those? Were you upset about the spotlight that was put on the likes of Alicia Baumgartner or Jamal Harvey or Yokasta Valle or Shanique? No. Or are you upset because you feel like, people paid attention to this, but they won't pay attention to Naoya Inoue on Saturday? Are you even going to pay attention to Naoya Inoue? I don't mean you. So it's like, it's all just kind of like this song and dance. It's all, as our good friend Jamal Hill will say, it's disingenuous. It's disingenuous because it's just the thing that you have to say if you're a boxing media member, especially the ones in the UK who drive me nuts. You have to say that to curry favor with the public. This was a sham. This was a joke. This was a black guy on the sport. Really? Was it? Was it really? Was it really? What was so bad about it? And then you see people coupling. This is the one that I find hilarious. They're coupling Jake losing and Andrew Tate losing. They're putting Jake Paul and Andrew Tate in the same category. Now I understand they're both quote unquote heels, but in terms of like what these two individuals have been accused of or what they've actually done in society, they couldn't be further away from each other. What has Jake done to actually deserve the hate that he has received? Here's KSI. And of course, KSI is going to spike the football because Andrew Tate, took his job at Misfits. We all know that that's not true, but this is part of the work. And he doesn't like Jake Paul. But let's be honest. Jake stepped up and fought someone that KSI has never fought. Like the caliber of fighter that Jake Paul fought on Friday is on a whole different stratus, a whole different level than anyone that KSI has fought. Jake Paul has never been accused of the stuff that Andrew Tate has been accused of. All Jake Paul has done over the last few years, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, correct me if I'm wrong, is build a promotion, give an opportunity to many women, bring the sport to Netflix 3 times. Like, where's the heel in all of that? I don't get it. Now, I know, you say I'm going to beat this guy, you say I'm him, you say I'm going to do this, you're annoying, you've got an annoying haircut, you've got an annoying YouTube, and all. I get that. But like, we're comparing him to Andrew Tate? That's crazy to me. It's not even on the same level.
There's real life things and then there's promotional things. And the real life things for Jake Paul don't quite stack up. They're not the same caliber of what you're discussing in terms of Andrew Tate. Like it's just different.
Like saying like, this was a great weekend to see bad guys lose. I'm like, there's levels of bad guy in the world, right?
Right. The KSI thing is what, the CEO of Misfits now, and then Jake is like his quote unquote rival.
Sure.
I really think the only reason people are comparing him is because it was like the hate watch of the weekend was
to what? Yeah.
The one area I do want to push back a tiny bit.
Go ahead.
I'm with you on nearly everything you're saying, especially as it relates to the event, right? The promotion. But as far as Jake Paul's performance, I do think there's some criticism warranted.
I agree with that.
I expected something completely different. He did not try to win the fight. And I don't think you could argue that. If survive the fight, fine. But if you think that desperately that your only chance to win is to just run, plant your feet, throw a bomb, and get knocked out. Like, if you're Jake Paul saying, I'm going to slay Goliath, show me that. That did not look like trying to slay Goliath.
I think that it was his only chance.
Why?
Is it a good performance? No. And especially, like I said, the takedowns, they were sloppy. It was frustrating. think it was the 4th round where things got like screwy and the referee got mad
The
at
first
them.
4 rounds were an abomination.
I thought
An abomination. I mean, we're talking about takedowns in a boxing.
By the way, I actually thought he won the first round. They both landed the same amount of punches, and I thought his punches were more significant. They landed 2. But the thing is, I didn't what did you expect? You expected to sit in the pocket? I guess no. There was no way. There was no way.
So how is he going to win the fight? Is it a fight or is it not a fight? This is the problem. This is the problem that Jake Paul will have in any future endeavor. After this, people are going to still be claiming it's rigged, it's fixed, because they're going to say, oh, it took too long for Anthony Joshua. He will never defeat that with that performance, right? Because if he was just trying to survive, then you're not selling me a fight, right? The whole thing is, I fight in legitimate fights, and here's the horse I'm riding in on. You're not going to see any fixed fights. You're going to see me fight in real fights, and I'm going to go up there and slay Goliath. You did not show the performance that tells me that that's what you were trying to do, and I think that will have people calling it into question. If you truly were trying to slay Goliath, and the best path was either to do that running thing or plant your feet and actually throw some hands, show me the version where you plant your feet and throw some hands.
Thought he did that. What do you mean? He landed those punches that he had to land and that he could land. When the guy's moving around and he's moving around.
I'm talking about Jake.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Anthony Joshua didn't move an inch. He was plodding forward.
I'm saying he's trying to catch him and he's moving around. Jake is moving around. At some point, as you say, you have to plant your feet. Did he hit him with a couple of? Again, I'm not saying he hit him with like 100 punches, but we have seen fights where people have historically had very low output. Very recently, this year, right? Canelo Skull. The Ryan Garcia fight, the Devin Haney fight. People sometimes don't throw the Brian Norman fight of just a few weeks. So my point is, that was the only chance that he had. If he would have stood there like Francis did, he would have gotten knocked out in the first or second round.
That's what I wanted to see, because Francis, to his credit, was trying to beat Anthony Joshua.
Francis had a bad game plan. He was switching stances.
The game plan for both is to beat Anthony Joshua.
Jake's game plan made a lot more sense to me going into the fight. There was no chance. When I found out that the ring was bigger, of course he's going to run. The problem with running is that he was going to gas himself out, which he did, because he has bad cardio.
Run and then what, though?
Run and lay a Hail Mary bomb. That was it. And it's what he tried to do, but he's not good enough to land that. And AJ is too big. There was too much distance between them. But even AJ was throwing out a distance too. You saw him whiff a couple times. And so the two of them were playing this cat and mouse game, which led to a bad fight. And by the way, if you want to blame the fight on anyone, you could blame it on Jake. The reason
I am blaming it on Jake.
I understand that. But that was still the only way that he was going to win the fight. Yes, it was.
No, it's not. That is not a winning strategy. That was the way he was never going to win the fight.
But exactly. So if there was one chance to win, it was like that. And even with that, he was a negative 20,000.
And then throw a punch?
No, it was to run around and hope that you could catch him. And that's what he did.
Ariel, do you think that if, in the example I used earlier, if Anthony Joshua fights some no-name guy, top 100 guy, just a tune-up fight, and it went like that, what do you think people would say?
If Anthony Joshua fought...
If it was not Jake Paul, it was any other guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, the eyes of the world aren't on this.
Sure.
People watching it.
And the performance was the same for Jake.
Exactly the same.
For the Jake opponent, like the guy who's playing Jake. And how many fights does the Jake guy have? 13 as well?
Same, yeah.
Yeah. That's the only chance the guy has.
What would the reaction be?
Yeah, that wasn't a great fight.
And they'd say Joshua's fighting bums now. What's going on here? They'd probably say.
Yeah, but it's not the same. It's not the same. You can't say that because he's getting paid $50 million to do this fight.
Where we disagree is I don't think that's the only way he could win that fight is in the first round when he's fresh. You try to do it, and like Francis Ngannou did, I'm going to stand here. I'm not scared of Anthony Joshua. I'm going to fight him. And by the way, that was the sell, right? Jake Paul was, I'm going to slay Goliath. Again, like the words that he was saying was, I'm going to slay Goliath.
Yes.
He didn't. He didn't try. He ran. And there was no chance.
Wait, so Jake is the first guy to say, I'm going to knock someone out and like have a different type?
No.
You know what I mean?
But
like we're going to hold this pre-fight talk.
It's different. It's different because his sell is only the pre-fight talk. The boxing is not the sell, as I've outlined and everybody knows now at this point. His sell, if you're somebody who can go in there and put on entertaining performances and you're like, I'm going to kill him, but you don't, but you actually are a competitive fighter and you can, in your next performance, show that, that's fine. But he can't. That's not what he's at. That's not his level. That's not what he's capable of. His sell is the sell, and that was the sell. So show me. Show me that. I can feel perfectly fine.
My
giving
response
him-
would be, it's up to you whether or not to believe the sell or not. So when he
But
says
this is
it,
the
you
thing.
could be like, yes, I'm expecting, or you'd be
That's
like,
a problem
no, you're not.
for him moving
Can I just-
forward, I believe. I don't
This
believe
is
the
the
sell
thing that's-
anymore.
Every single Jake Paul fight we talk about in the lead up to it, like, don't be fooled, guys. This guy is a real boxer. We shouldn't be shocked when people suddenly hold him to the same standards as a boxer. Like that's what's happening here. Every other fight, it's like, this guy is a real boxer. This guy is for real. And I'm completely with you, Ariel. The disparity is crazy. Joshua is one of the greatest heavyweights of the last decade of his generation. Like this was only ever going to go one way. But I think that's where people are like, you've been telling us like this guy is a real boxer. So we need to hold him to the standard of a boxer to some degree, I think.
Rick
GC
is
wants
also
to say
making
something.
the argument for why people are upset, because there were a lot of people online that were upset especially through the first 4 rounds of the fight. So to Rick's point, I do understand why some people are upset with the fight.
I think Ariel's right, though, that there are some who are upset just to be upset. There's not people who are upset because Jake Paul had that game plan. They're the ones who are like, Jake Paul needs to fight a real fight. And then when he does, they're still mad. Like, they're still finding a way to be mad about it. Make no mistake. I respect Jake Paul for taking this fight, especially on the short notice that he did, for salvaging this and trying to make a spectacle, picking one of the hardest opponents he could possibly pick. Also, it sounds like Terrence Crawford was, in the mix and things like that. Like, Jake Paul put his nuts on the table with this thing. And so I respect him, but I also did not appreciate the performance.
There are different levels to 13 fights, right? There's a Moses Talma who has around the same amount of fights. There's like the David Morrells who have the same amount of fights. So just because you say, because Pizza, you're giving me the example of, all right, so some dude with there's different levels. We all know that. There's someone who's coming out of the Olympics. There's someone who's coming from the amateur. Some dudes have 100 amateur fights. Jake has none. And I guess I don't view him. I kind of view it as, I was trying to think like, what's the best example, but there isn't a great example. There's a spectacle element to it. And the escape is, could this guy who has no amateur background, who doesn't come from a boxing background, could this guy who has taken a very non-traditional path throughout his career, fighting MMA fighters and all this other stuff, could this guy pull off the impossible? That's really the story here for me. Could David slay Goliath? And in this particular fight, it looked like that, right? The face-offs and all that stuff. And so to me, all the pressure was truly on AJ to be like, no, you little twerp, you're not going to make a name off of my back. I'm going to go out there and squash you. And he did. And I thought, given what we know about Jake, given his skill set, given his size, his reach, his weight, all that stuff, he had no chance other than to try to play the sort of, cat and mouse game. And so that's why when I'm watching it, I wasn't like, Moro was getting very upset. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, Moro, what did you expect? Like, what are you getting so mad about? This is exactly the type of fight that I thought it was going to be. I thought my official prediction was that AJ was going to knock him out in the 3rd or 4th. And so it took a little bit longer than that. But in the end, I thought he was going to try to run around. Once we found out about the 22x22 ring, that's why I asked AJ about it at the press conference. I was like, oh, of course, he wants more space to run around. But I thought to myself, he's going to get tired, and then eventually he's going to, he's going to get caught. All to say, again, if I'm trying to win someone over on boxing, I'm not putting this one into the VHS. My question, though, is, and I feel like his stock has gone up. I feel like people are like, all right, respect. You bit off more than you could chew. Now go back down to the cruiserweight division and, take a step back. Maybe you're fighting the Tommy Furies. Maybe you're fighting the freaking KSIs or the Andrew Tates or the Chase Demores of the world. Obviously, he's not at that level, and he may never get to that level. Does anyone feel otherwise? Does anyone feel like the fight was so bad, the knockout was so bad, that actually now he can't be on Netflix, he can't get these big fights, he won't get the attention of the people like he did on Friday and last November against Mike Tyson? What do you think, Rick?
No, I do not. I do not think that this was embarrassing or devastating, and I do think there are a lot of people out there who will give him the brownie points for, hey, you stepped in there, you got your jaw shattered by Anthony Joshua. Like, respect, tip of the cap, right? I just criticized his performance, but as I said, my respect level for him remains the same or went up. I've always thought Jake Paul is doing something admirable as far as this goes. And so I will give him that respect, and I don't think this was embarrassing to hurt the stock. The question I would ask, there's 2 things. One, I think it's going to be harder to sell Jake Paul from the perspective that the veil has fallen. You talked about, hey, the story is, can this guy who has no amateur experience beat Goliath? And the answer is like definitively no. We know that now. There is no question about that. There is no mystery.
Well, for now, let's not pretend people haven't been knocked out and come back and rebuilt themselves to become a.
Again, this is where the performance itself matters to me, right? The performance itself was not good, and you pair that with the idea that this was the outcome. I do think that question.
But we watch a sport all the time where people lose fights and then come back and go on 10-fight winning streaks. I'm just saying, let's not pretend that a loss is definitive, right? You could. Do I think he will have it in him to go on a 10-fight winning streak now and work his way up the rankings? Probably not. He doesn't need to do it. He's a multimillionaire. But I don't think that a loss and a performance should be the definitive write-off of someone.
It's not a definitive write-off. I'm just saying it's harder. It's harder to sell that.
Take a step back. Yeah, when you lose, you take a step back. When you get knocked out, it's an even greater step back. Would you want to say, GC?
I was just saying that this is the first time we've seen him at this level. It's not like he's like a UFC fighter who has 4 or 5 UFC wins and then he loses a couple in a row and then he goes on a run afterward. This was his first step into championship level, and obviously I understand the size disparity, everything like that. You know, maybe it's different at a lower weight class, but this is the first time we've seen him go up against a world-class boxer, and it was non-competitive.
Yes. But then the question. So the question to you is, and the question to everyone is, do you now have zero interest?
No, I still have interest
in watching it continue. Do you now feel like he has lost?
What is it?
The
is
moral
it
victory. Is it boxing?
Yes. Does it have to be boxing? I'm more interested in Jake Paul competing in MMA at this point.
Oof, I don't know about that. I mean, I guess
is this a loss? Like everybody's talking about this. Everybody. Like I was in a barbershop today. Everybody's talking about it. Like, and yeah, it's not positive. Everyone's like, oh, blah blah blah. Isn't this what this is what the product is? Is like, it's not like Joshua, as we were talking about, like in some heavyweight fight, in some rebuild. The eyes of the world are on this thing. And I agree with you in terms of the performance, Rick. But like, are we talking about the product here? As far as Netflix are concerned, they'll be like, this is brilliant. Everybody is talking about this event.
Here's my fear, though. I agree with you to an extent. Here's my fear, though. What are the names? The list of names has shrunk for me. I was willing to entertain a Canelo fight prior to this, when Canelo was the name instead of Anthony Joshua. I am no longer willing to see a Canelo fight. I was when Terrence Crawford's name was thrown around in this, I was willing to entertain it. Let's see it. I'm not entertaining that any longer. So the list of opponents has shrunk significantly.
I don't think there's anything wrong. Like, he went from Tyson to Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., right? So I don't think every time they're going to be blockbuster names.
Yeah.
So if the next one is Tommy Fury,
I'm not interested.
If the next one is KSI,
I'm interested, but I don't think it's real.
Loads of people are interested, not us. That's
what do you mean it's real?
Here's the thing.
You think it would be scripted?
No. I just don't think they'll ever fight. Like,
I'm just saying that caliber.
This guy's a genius salesman.
Yeah.
That caliber, yes.
He's going to say, the ring is going to be tiny. I'm going to be fighting this guy. My jaw's just been broken. This is what it is. Like, he's going to sell it again. I'm going to be sitting there watching it again. And everyone's going to go fucking mad after it. And everyone's going to be like, oh, I can't believe this. Can you believe this happened again? And I'll be like, yeah, because it's happened loads of times. And again, I'm going to watch. That's the way it is.
To me, it's an entire story. It's an entire package. And again, if you want to call me biased, fine. I don't give a fuck. Call me biased. But to have this spotlight get shine on other boxers, on the sport of boxing, while everyone cries that boxing is dying, meanwhile, this dude brought boxing to Netflix 3 times in the past year. How could that be bad?
No, Jake is the promoter.
If you want to turn it off after Baumgartner, go ahead, turn it off after Baumgartner.
No one's turning it off.
But you know what I'm saying? It's just like, so is it a net positive or is it a net negative? And I don't think, look, if you want to buy into the I'm going to knock him out, then okay, good for you for eating up the Wolf tickets. That's fine. I still think that he has come a lot further than a lot of people thought. And I think, of course, you can't sit here and give praise. You can't, because then you're on the take. But this guy will beat a lot of these dudes now. He will beat KSI. The version of KSI, the last version that we saw of KSI, he would beat Andrew Tate, who was in talks to fight him not that long ago.
He smoked both of those boys. It's a different game. It's a different thing.
Okay, so then we find out, now we're going to find out truly how much he loves it. Because as you said, you come off a broken jaw, it's hard to come back, period. So we're going to find out. You come off getting knocked out, it changes you. We're going to find out. We're going to find out by the opponents that he's going to choose. We're going to find out a lot about this guy. But I think I walked away from that on Saturday morning, thinking to myself, like, yeah, it could have gone a lot worse. We could be looking at memes today of him just completely knocked out cold in 30 seconds. Didn't happen. And I don't think, in 10 years from now, the minutia as to, how long he lasted or him running is going to be remembered. I think it's going to be that, like, hey, he took a loss and he took a knockout, and then he got up smiling and he got up looking like a lunatic. I think ultimately that's why I think it's a win for him. Also, the millions of dollars.
I actually thought that was the biggest win, is that the punch that ultimately put him out, he goes to the ground and is like, whoa, that was crazy. I can't believe I just took that.
Like he enjoyed it.
Everything like that. Yeah, it was like he was enjoying it, loving it in there. And then in the interview with you afterward, he's just like, think my jaw's broke. Huge glob of blood. He's like, yeah, that thing's definitely broken. Like he's taking it in stride, like he's taking it like a real fighter, which is admirable and will gain respect of a lot of people. To Pete's point, he said it earlier in the show, and he just said it again about the barbershop. You can't do a Jake Paul fight without it being shrouded in controversy, without people having all these hot takes and getting angry about it. And that's why people watch it. That's what gets people to tune in. And that's why I think Netflix loves it so much. But then also to Rick's point, I do think that the list is starting to shrink, because now if he goes and he fights another world-class guy and he loses again in a similar fashion that he lost to AJ, that's where I think the interest will truly start falling off, where it's just like, how can you even sell this, because people just know that he's going to go in there and lose?
There is an element. I think I actually saw PT. You referred to it as like a Jackass fight, an episode of Jackass.
Knoxville against Butterbean.
There is a certain element of like, he takes the punch, he smiles, and he's like, whoa, that was nuts. Almost like he's doing like a stunt, and he wants, like Steve-O, like he wants to see. And that's why I think he sometimes doesn't play by the same rules as a traditional boxer who is trying to climb up the ranks and eventually get to a contender fight and win a world title. He defies all those rules that we have been beholden to as far as fight fans and fighters. And so he has that smile, and you're like, oh, his motives are different. Obviously, his motives are different. His career path is different. And again, I go back to the fact that I think that he has lasted a lot longer than a lot of people ever thought. The guy who made his debut in 2020 against a Nissan Gib certainly lasted a lot longer than I think most boxing fans thought, and most of his fans probably thought as well. And even his critics, the likes of Dana White, who would used to say like, Jake, are you going to fight someone your size? Are you going to fight? Well, now he just fought someone who is like 40 pounds bigger than him, way better than him. What can you say now about him in terms of like, does he have the balls? And that's why I think ultimately you have to at least tip your cap to the guy. Thanks for watching this video. Before you go, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for us. Also, give us a thumbs up, leave a nice comment. These things go a long way. And while you're here, do check out the rest of the channel. We've got live shows and full interviews, clips, and a whole lot more. We're doing big things here, and we appreciate your support very much.